Well, there's where people are playing out what they believe something to be or what they want themselves to be. A really good example of it is where people want to, I don't know, become more in touch with their spirituality or their soul or why they're really here. So then they start dressing a different way, or they'll start speaking a different way. They'll start to change the tonality of their voice. It's not really them. They're putting on a persona. They're performing. They're performing in their image of what a spiritual person would be. I would speak like this, and I would refer to you like this, and I would dress in these garbs, and I will hang out with these people, and I will only say these sorts of things and refrain from saying. So it's all based on a construct of the mind that's projected through a persona or an ego. So it's very common that people will say that the first stage of spirituality is actually a hyper-egoic state, because it's realizing that there is an ego and a persona, which we're not. So instead of being that, if we can not be that, we must be more spiritual. So we're performing and we're acting. And acting plays a huge part in a lot of the lessons that we share, because most of what happens is an act. And it's also one of the reasons that in the legal system, which is the parallel mirror image of the real stuff that we're talking about, that's why they're called acts that quote unquote govern or control the general population when they agree to being that thing that is governed. But the reason that that's so effective is because we're already governed by our acts. If we're acting like we're something that we're not, we are controlled by that. We're never going to be who we are while we're acting. So that's a huge part of the whole picture that we're talking about. But yeah, as far as thyself and knowing thyself and acting and performing it all goes hand in hand. And the less we have a need or a desire or a drive to be something, we can get back to simply being, which is exactly who we are. It's nothing more than that. But we're kind of programmed or ingrained with this feeling or belief system that that's just not enough. Like how am I going to be seen if I'm just like, I don't know, doing nothing, leaving nothing undone? How would I be seen? How would I be heard or valued? So then we perform instead and we act, and therefore we're not who we are. We're never going to get in touch with that part that's literally there to support everything that we are and want to be and are born to be. We're just missing, which is one of the definitions of the word sin, every time we act and perform. So when people can learn to get beyond that, or they're willing to get beyond that, which is a form of sacrifice, because with that sacrifice comes the perceived feeling of what will be safety and security and value and every way of fitting into the world, but not realizing that that's only just going to lead to another path of, wouldn't say destruction per se, but just not self, like not really what we're chasing, which is why, it's funny you mentioned what you lost. A lot of people, what I've found is that when we're in the world and acting in a certain way, in order to find more of what we really are, we have to lose that which we're not. So for me, it was losing my identity as an athlete. So I got chronic fatigue syndrome, couldn't train, couldn't do anything in my early 20s, which is a pretty big time for a young man to lose his life force and vitality, because all of my identity was wrapped up in what I was doing. And I lost that in order to not find straight away, but to get closer to what I really am. And likewise, you weren't your finances. Somebody else wasn't there, I don't know, like a finger they lost or a relationship they lost. That's not what you are. You're not those things. So that's why I like that Buddhist koan that you mentioned, because it really just alludes to that. Like in the world, that's not what we are. When we can get back to what we are, we're already just, that's the place we're meant to be. That's the kingdom. That's why we called it the humble kingdom, because that's the place that so many people are trying to chase through other means instead of just being, or being okay with remembering, like reconnecting to that thing, like you said, that example of the face you were before your parents were born, like just that reconnection. 100%, couldn't agree more. So that's why when I was, so one of the, if you want to call it a benefit, that I received from being ill for so long and spending so much money and time and hope in outsourcing to other people to tell me what was wrong with me and to fix me in return for money or whatever the case was. And what I realized was no end of searching was ever going to fix anything. The day I actually started to quote unquote heal was when I just decided to meet life where I was at. So that's why I coined that phrase, meet life, meet the healer. because it's, I was around when I was in college, I was around people that were on their third or fourth degree. And I'm like, when are you ever actually going to implement what you're doing into the world? But they had such a fear of actually meeting the world because they might be an imposter, they might not know enough yet, so that I need another degree. It's constant outsourcing, never being enough, which is that's their expression into the world. I'm not enough. So I will hide from the world and study and become a master and then a professor and then a whatever. It's like, but of what? You've never stepped foot outside of the university. You're not really capable of doing much compared to a guy who's a first-year apprentice, has more value to the world. Not more knowledge necessarily or at all, but of more value to himself and to the world, right? So I realized that I was spending all this time trying to heal by doing all the right things, the right protocols, cutting this out of my diet, doing this diet, doing this practice, only prescribing to these thoughts and eschewing those. And then at the end of the day, all it was I call it a hamster wheel of health. It was just a constant drain. And the day I just decided, all right, I'm pretty sure I've done enough. Like I've done a lot of things and with concerted effort too, not just half-assing stuff, like really, really going in with a lot of discipline, a lot of intention and everything else. So I realized that there must be more to it than that. And so what was the more to it part was literally just being willing to meet life, which is another expression of letting go of fear and having faith that meet life and life will meet you and it will support you. You will have the energy to perform this task should you meet it with every fiber of your being, as opposed to resisting and holding things back and having fear. But if I do that, this might happen, or but I don't have enough energy for that, or what if, So that was a huge lesson for me and something that was one of my formative lessons in natural law. Because I'll just mention, Duncan, a lot of people ask me, they say, can you recommend books to read on natural law? And I always say, I don't know that there are any. I learned everything that I learned from literally having my own life experiences and observing life and being willing to observe life, being willing to not chase a dollar, not chase a friend, not chase validation, not chase attention, not chase those things, but just being willing to just be who I am, and where I'm at, and just observe the way life works. And that's how I learned about natural law. And that's how, as my natural rebellious side was becoming more of an adult in the world and challenging structures of quote unquote authority, I was already seeing these laws, these natural laws play out through health, through life, through relationships, through finances, through everything, including and extending into structures of authority that I knew were not real, but were a construct. And that's how I learned how to break those down. It was never from a book, and it was never from, you always learn something from other people, but by and large, it was all just through the observation of life itself. Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's good. It's this is more what I prefer to talk about because it's one of the reasons that I don't like talking about or sharing. And I also don't recommend processes and like mass notice templates and things that a lot of people are itching for. Like that's where that's where they think that they're going to get like a solution or some kind of empowerment from or some kind of result from. But because it's not real, it's not of their creation or their volition, it's not really truly of their will, it can only carry an illusion of something happening that's going to be to their benefit, but never will that actually play out in real life in that way, simply for the reasons that you very well just described. And one of the other aspects of that is, as we're trying to do that, what we're really doing, like forget, like the government or someone you think is an enemy, like what is always witnessing everything, thoughts, intentions, dreams, like nothing goes unnoticed by life. And what we're really affirming to the world, even if if we're performing, we're affirming to the world what we're not, much more than what we are. And that's not a good thing to do. So, and when you're saying as well, like as you kind of project up to being this thing, and then you meet the fire, and there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with wanting to test yourself or like there's a degree of, for example, as an athlete or as a performer, a musician on stage, you don't want to go into a competition or to perform for an audience who you can very well move and give a great performance to, when I say performance in the positive sense, they can really touch people if you go on stage thinking, oh, nah, I shouldn't really, I'm not really worth going. Like, no one would really want to listen to my violin or my piano or whatever. Like, you do have to have a healthy sense of, I am good at this, and what I have is a great gift to people, and I will perform at my best, you know? Which is still a humility. It's just recognizing what is as opposed to going. But sometimes, especially when we're new to something, we have to have more confidence and certainty than we're actually imbued with, as long as it's not too far. Now, the opposite of that is when we can get to a place where we don't need that. And that's the humility side that I think is so important. Like, for example, I do share, you know, you might have heard me share some stories, Duncan, of how I've gone into airports. One story I always tell is when, like, it was all the masks and stuff were in. And I went into an airport because I had to fly south, and I was the only one, you know, amongst a sea of faceless faces, I was the only one without a mask. And I walked straight to the check-in counter because I can't be bothered doing I don't even know how to do the printout stuff, and say, hey, I haven't got my boarding pass. Are you able to help me? They said, yeah, no problem, sir. How can I help you with something else? And then they said, sir, would you like an upgrade for your flight? I said, yes, please, that'd be great. And thanks, like, no one asked me anything. People are looking, but no one asked me anything. No one stopped me. I got a flight upgrade and I was treated very, very well. That's much different from most other people's experiences. And the reason I share that is not to be like, I'm great. It's just that it's an expression of who I am and where I'm at in relation to the offer. So that's my standing, and it's just inherent. I don't need to go in eyeballing people or like, you can't do this or anything like that. But further to that, this is the more important part of this particular scenario, is that despite that, I will still never walk into an airport or any place thinking that I'm too good for anything else, because that's exactly when, as you described before, you will meet the metaphorical fire. There is a lot of things that can go wrong in situations like that if you're forgetting who you are and you're carrying this massive sense of disempowerment and entitlement that gets projected as this, like, you can't touch me, I have rights, I'm this, I'm that, you're this, you're that. That will always go badly, and you can definitely end up in a room for hours, detained, surrounded by 20 guys with machine guns. Like, that can definitely happen, and it has happened to a lot of people. It, generally speaking, doesn't happen to people who carry the energy of exactly what I was describing before. But that energy is also, while it's confident, because there's no enemy, there's nothing to defend and nothing to explain, as we teach in our course, but also there's not an over projection of what I really am. It's just a simple standing, nothing to explain, nothing to defend. It just is. So that then leads to a very positive outcome where you're treated very well. And the natural state of being, or the natural state of things outside of the illusion of masks, is not wearing a mask. So truth in that circumstance is self-evident. So it just is. You just are in an airport without a mask. You just get an upgrade. You just are not bothered or accosted by police, airport staff, security people, or anything of that nature. Juxtapose that with the experience that most people have in those situations, and the difference is not the amount of knowledge you have, not anything other than the state of being that you carry, which is your standing relative to the offer. So that's why, like, a lot of our course goes into offers, standing, and agreements. So that lineage explains a lot for people once they actually get their head around that. I should mention, when you say I've embodied who I am, I don't believe I've embodied who I am. However, in that particular circumstance, I've embodied who I am relative to the situation and the offer. Because I've just had a lot of experience. I was naturally questioning things from a young age. I've been through a lot. I've been arrested. I've been in cells. I've been assaulted. I've had all that experience already. So I'm not scared of that. So I carry a different understanding and a different humility as well. Like, if there was ever a time where, this is something else I teach a lot, is pick your battles, like, know who you are in the jungle. Because people see the police or the state as this great enemy. And I'm like, all right, let's take that construct out and let's put you in the jungle. Now, do you know who you are relative to the silverback, to the anaconda, to the eagle, to the ants? Do you know? Because if you don't, things are going to go bad within about an hour and you're going to be crying or dead. You have to know who you are relative and pick your battles, know who you are in the jungle. And if I was going into a similar situation, but I read the situation because I'm not there projecting what it is, I'm actually able to discern, which is part of judgment, which is a big part of our lessons. And therefore, being able to pick my battles, I would stick a mask on my face. Not the one that they prescribe, of my own version of like, because there's so much to like, that's another way of learning about natural law is, what you really can do within what is a mask, what constitutes a mask, what defines a mask, like what, all that sort of stuff. There are times where I would actually, maybe, I've never had to do this, but I'm just saying I have enough humility to say, if it was needed and it was to get to a place of more value than arguing with somebody or to protect my wife or my family, then I have no issue doing whatever it takes to do that because it's of a higher nature, a higher value, or a higher standing relative to this offer that I am currently experiencing. So it's a huge thing that a lot of people missed over the last 5 years, and they ended up like really draining themselves for no reason whatsoever. And one of the key lessons in that though is that when we talk, or when I talk about a story or relate an experience, I'm definitely not fully embodied in who I am, because there are other aspects of life where that is not the case. So I think it's important for people to realize that, like, don't definitely get inspiration and learn from people, but never like project up towards somebody else as if they're better or somehow further ahead in life in general. But we all should learn from each other, and everybody's got those parts of them that they have not fully embodied. Yeah, it's a very rare person. Like, for example, like, I'm fortunate enough to have met people who, if you knew of the abilities that they had, you would be like, who are they? Like, I've got to know about it. How do they do that? And like stuff that's not technically in the realm of possibilities for most human beings. And every single one of them is still a flawed human being. In some respect, has not fully embodied who they are. And I think it's a rare person to find, insofar as maybe they're not even in the embodied human form that we recognize, or that you would come across, like when the students ready, the teacher will appear. I think if they exist, you'll meet them if and when you're ready. But to an untrained eye, you would either not see them, or they might even appear as like a homeless person or something. So it's just, you would never experience the benefit, so to speak, of who or what they are. That's just my own way of seeing it, but I just want to reiterate, as I tell stories, don't try to copy what I do, and I'm not trying to say that I am fully embodied or anything like that. Again, from my observations of what I was experiencing in life, when I came across commerce and I realized how much that was everything that I thought I was fighting against in the world, in the system that was wrong, quote unquote, I started to realize, okay, that's all mirrored on something that's real. So what exists in the fiction doesn't just exist out of fiction, it exists as a mirror image or an expression or a projection or whatever of something that's real. Like, something has to give rise to that. Something real has to give rise to that fiction. So when I came across commerce and the rules and the laws of commerce, I'm like, okay, offer, acceptance, non-acceptance, negotiation or counteroffer or conditional acceptance, either way, we have an agreement. The degree to which you can handle that middle part determines the quality of the agreement, as in quality in what you receive or how bad it is for you or how good it is for you is determined by the middle part, which I have since come to explain to people as your standing relative to the offer. So then when I start seeing, I'm like, okay, so commerce, all right. So commerce has a lot to do with currencies. Okay, so it's not just, I know that the fiat currency is fiction, but what's that based on? So then you start going into bonds and gold and all the other things. And it's like, but what's that based on? And I started to see it's really based on the currency that we hold, this gold that we have inside. Like, that's the primary currency. And one of the ways we give that out is through our attention, and also through projecting into illusions. So we give that away a lot. So then I'm like, okay, wait, so that's a currency, so that's commerce, so therefore there has to be an offer. Like, why would I give my attention? There's got to be an offer. And where's that offer coming from? What's my standing relative to that? And therefore, what's the agreement? And more to that, what's the contract? Because once we add consideration, which is something of value to give to solidify an agreement, now we have a contract. So we're really dealing in a lot of contracts in this inner world and this unseen, non-physical way that we interact and we do commerce. But with what? It's not just business. It's not just, I'll pay you to mow my lawn or whatever. It's business or commerce in an entirely different sense that means much more, holds much more value, that all that's simply based on. It's just like, that's where the rule book was taken from, is from real life. So that's where I was like, okay, because I was a big victim for a number of years, you know. When I first got sick, it was my coach's fault. They didn't know what they were doing. They were saying silly stuff. They weren't listening to me. And then it was the naturopath's fault that I first hired. He didn't help me in that. And then it's the doctor's fault. It's the medical system's fault. It's my amalgams. It's the dentist's fault. It's the system's fault. It's the educational system's fault. We'd be here for half an hour if I rattled off all of the other people and institutions whose fault it was that I was where I was at. And I got to the stage, again, when I was doing so much good stuff that was supposed to be helping me that wasn't helping. And I got to the stage where I was like, you know what? What if none of this was somebody else's fault? What if I created all of it? Just as a question, and questions are a big part of natural law. And almost immediately I had more energy. Not that I got up and started doing push-ups, but I was like not functioning at the time, but I immediately just felt more life force in me. And I was like, wow, that feels different. So I'm thinking, okay, what does that really mean? What does it mean that I've asked a question? I'm again asking you a question about my question. So okay, it means I'm just taking more responsibility. Like, what can I do about this? Rather than trying to outsource, I'm now starting to insource. And that was the beginning of that whole journey of natural law. Really, for me, was born from not being a victim anymore and just starting to take responsibility. So I was then exercising inner authority, and lo and behold, there was less quote unquote authority that I started seeing in the world. I was like, people were trying to tell me about governments and the Illuminati and I'm like, who cares? Like what? Because I knew that I was governing myself through my own programs and my own belief systems and my own lack of knowing of who I was. So I just started focusing on that. And then as a result, all these things I used to try to fight in the system just started clearing up naturally as a natural progression or expression of beginning, not knowing, but beginning to know who I was to a greater degree than 5 seconds ago. And so that's the basis of essentially what I share today is that, but in all these different ways that can be applied to yourself and in the world. And it's just that was game changing. Yeah, so the word itself implies a lot. So you've got another ship, like a citizenship and a relationship. It means you're on board with something else, another energy. So we have relationships with everything. We have a relationship, obviously we associate a loved one or a partner. We have relationships with our thoughts, our feelings. We have a relationship with the world. We have a relationship with everything that we experience when that becomes really clear is when you learn to become the observer or the watcher of these experiences or of these relationships. And but they carry us places. That's the thing. It's like they're not bad. Like sometimes when I got to reiterate that if I bring up a word like it has a negative connotation, nothing's bad or negative in that way. It's just something to realize that that's what it implies and that's what it's based on and what it's about. So when we realize that, we can start to have more of a let's just say proactive role in where that takes us or why, because we're starting to embody the experience of that ship and where that's meant to take us. So when we, I guess a better way to look at it is how do we relate? So how are we relating and what is that? What does it mean to relate to something or to someone and to ourselves especially? Because most of what we experience in the world, those relations, how we relate is based on how we're relating to something inside of us. Like you said, like a shame, a guilt, a belief system. I've learned that the world operates this way. And that's usually how we will relate to something that we're experiencing in the world, either to even a season or a food or a person or a narrative we hear or anything, an animal of some kind. Like we will relate to it based on something internal. Which is awesome because it means we have a lot to explore. Like I've never understood why people would get bored. Like, oh, there's nothing to watch on television. I'm like, do you have any idea how many like things there are to explore in your own world? It's just if you ever not that there's anything wrong with being bored actually as well. Like there's a thing with a podcast. I'll say something. I'm like, well, that's a whole other topic. But there's nothing wrong with being bored because it's generally where a lot of the sages would always say like it's totally okay to be bored, and sometimes it's good to create space to be bored because through boredom something else is born. But just what I'm saying is like the way people try to distract themselves so much. I'm like, if you want to go explore something, there's so much to explore if you're willing to have a look. So I can't remember what we're talking about though. Was that pretty much the question? That was just through stillness and meditation. I was literally just, I wasn't trying to think my way into what I should call what I'm doing. And in the past, I've actually spent way too long and held back on an expression into the world because I'm like, I've got to name it right first. Like it's got to be this, it's got to represent that, it's got to be the right name, it's got to be unique, I've got to get the URL, it's got to be, and I'm like, it just came to me when I was like, what is it that I'm really, like, what was it that I'm moving away from? Because I was involved in other things prior. Some people might know the backstory. It's not really relevant to today, but I stepped away from that for a reason. And I gave up a lot in order to do that because it was just not a pure expression of what I thought I needed to do in the world, or just we'll say that. And so I was just thinking like, well, what was it that I wasn't liking? Like, where was it that I was out of alignment with myself and my own values and my own purpose and my own path in life? And a lot of it was from doing what other people thought should be done, and we're trying to, like make me, no one can make it, like no one made me do anything. That's why I say trying to. And I'm like, well, why are you trying to make me? And I experienced that a lot over the last 5 years because it's like, you need to talk about this, or you need to promote this group, or you need to do that. You need to come and do this. You need to do this for free. You need to do this. And I was like, no, I don't. I don't need to do anything. I just need to be who I am. So then at the end of the day, I boiled it down to that. I just need to be who I am. And what am I really like? If everybody was getting to know who they are, like, what does that bring? Like, why are we trying to chase all this other stuff in the world when there's something that's already there, but we're just turning our back on it? And I'm like, well, that's the kingdom within. And then I realized that the reason that we don't get to it is because we have all of this mind of doing, and this is right and you're wrong, and this should be done, and you're not worth this and all that. And I'm like, that's just such a not where it's at. So the way that I actually came, for example, into getting more of my health back was from actually softening into more of who I was. So I'm like, well, that's humility. That's the willingness to not have to be something that you're not. So that's a humility. So then I'm like, okay, well, the humble kingdom, that's got a ring to it. And that was it. I just went, yeah, that feels right. That encapsulates what it is that I'm trying to share, as opposed to trying to fight some fictitious government entity that people don't even know what it even is. So then it's like, may as well get to something that you actually can get to, that is real. And that's that inner place that we all have the potential to access. Nuggets that you dug up before, where you said like you're a nut being cracked open, and I know that I went through this myself, where I think a lot of people think that that's life dealing them a lemon kind of thing, like, and they go into the victim consciousness like I was talking about, and they're like, well, why me, and this isn't fair, and blah blah blah. But I think what people need to realize, well, not need to, I think what would be helpful for people to realize is that not everybody in life, in the lifetime that they have, are chosen to be a nut that's cracked open. Because there are people in this world who you can bake with Wi-Fi, they can eat microwave dinners every day of the week, they can watch television, drink, smoke, boost themselves, do whatever, and they will not have a crisis moment the way some of us have in this lifetime. So the fact that you actually have that is a real gift and a blessing. And it's this invitation of like, hey, student of life, as in if that's God talking to you, you actually have been chosen. This is your moment to actually have the offer to have an awakening of sorts. Like, awakening is a new age term, but to know that there is more to life than these average people over here will never even know that it exists. And you have to be able to show that you're worthy of that. Hence, so like you said, if you're not listening to that, life kind of knocks a little harder until you crack open. So you can either wait for a, cataclysmic style loss of something like a few of us have experienced, or you can listen to the more subtle signs and follow it on more of your own terms. But either way, just know that that's a real blessing, and it's a gift that not everybody has access to in this lifetime. So if it is happening to you, or has happened recently, or you've been going through it for 30 years and you still haven't figured it out, it's something that a lot of people in this world are just not built to have in this lifetime. So just see it. If you can see it as such, I think you'll have a much better, you'll see it for what it is and have a much better experience.